All right, so today's question comes from Troy. He emailed me this and he said I could share it and we could use it as an episode. So it's kind of a multi-part question. So Troy said, I'm having an issue trying to understand how to market my services when it comes to offering email copy to clients. Specifically, what do clients expect out of me? Do I come up with their entire campaigns and email topics and automations, or should they already know what exactly they need from me? Do you work with a designer on every single email as well? I spent countless hours reading books, taking courses, and for some reason I find it so difficult to get an explanation on this. Which, I'm not surprised, because when you're reading books and taking courses, a lot of those can be pretty vague, and this is kind of in the weeds stuff, and that's kind of why we're doing this, so we can talk about some of the in the weeds stuff. So I think the way we're going to tackle this one is Andrew thought about this in one way, I thought about it in other ways. So we're just going to take turns, and we'll start off with how Andrew looks at this.
Yeah, awesome. So I basically thought of this in terms of like what a client might want from you in terms of 4 steps in a process. So at the first step would be strategy. So there's a lot that can go into that, but we're talking about things like mapping out the sequence, deciding what offers to include, deciding on the cadence, what kind of triggers you're going to use, maybe even things like customer analysis. If you're doing like voice of customer research and you're doing customer interviews, like that kind of thing can be sort of lumped under strategy. The next thing is copy. So once the campaign's mapped out, you need someone to actually go ahead and write the copy for each of those emails. Then you have design. In my experience, most SaaS businesses are using email templates, or they have something that's extremely minimal, just kind of like plain text. And then the last thing is implementation into the email system. So someone needs to actually make sure that all of those emails are going to go to the right people at the right time. So if we look at each of those, so starting with strategy, that has a huge influence on the results of the campaign. And not a whole lot of people can do that well. Relatively few people can do it well. Same thing with copy. Copy has a massive influence on the results that you're going to get. And not that many people can do that well either. When it comes to design, again, since most businesses are using email templates, that sort of takes out of the equation the idea of like, can other people do this well? And also design an email, particularly in like B2B email. I don't have data in front of me or anything like that, but design has a much, much smaller influence in your results than copy does. And then finally, implementation, like obviously that has to be done correctly, but in my experience, most SaaS businesses are able to train someone in-house to do that, or they have someone in-house who is in charge of that. And there isn't really a whole lot of value in outsourcing that part of it. And there are exceptions to that, of course. So what do I suggest then in terms of, for a copywriter asking this question? I would say you want to focus heavily on the first 2 things, strategy and copy, because they are the most valuable part of the process. And since you're a copywriter, those kinds of things are within your core strengths, or at least the core strengths that you're trying to develop. One other thing that Josh, you and I have talked about in the past is like that neither of us are willing to get involved in the email system of our clients. My reason is that I like to sleep at night, and if something goes wrong, I do not want that phone call. I don't want that email of, hey, you sent this, all went out to the wrong segment, and now we have to scrap together apology emails and deal with telling everyone in the organization that you screwed up. So that is most of it. The other things that I'll add is that sometimes clients will come to you and they'll say, we already have the strategy figured out. We just need you to write the copy. In very early on in your career, that can actually be kind of like a blessing, because then you can focus on just the copy part. But over time, I think that most people, if you want to get paid more and do more impactful work, then you're going to want to start pushing back when clients tell you that they already have the strategy figured out, and you're going to want to at least be involved, like as a partner in coming up with that strategy, or maybe even kind of take it over. And the reason for that, again, is just that it's going to increase the value. You can charge more, and so on. The only exception to what I've said so far is that, if you decide to go all in on email, I'm sure there could be some clients who would benefit from having like the soup to nuts service, where you're going to do the strategy, you're going to do the copy, you're going to give them the templates or the design for each email, and you're going to go ahead and put it into their system. It's just not something that I've ever done, and it's not something that I think most copywriters aspire to. So to sum up everything that I've said so far, I would say you want to focus really heavily on being part of the strategy, and obviously the copy, design, and implementation are things that you could have a great career never touching either of those things.
Definitely. Yeah. So I guess the approach that I took is I just kind of looked at the different ways that I've worked with clients over the years and work with clients currently. And I guess the comforting news there is that there isn't one way that you can work with clients. It's really just about making sure that you scope out something that's aligned with what they need, you charge accordingly, and you make sure they're aware of any potential downsides. So for example, like Andrew said, if they've got their strategy in place, their outlines, and you're just writing copy, that's okay, as long as you let them know that you're not going to be able to lend your brain to their strategy. And so everything you're doing is going to assume that the strategy is sound and that it's based on good research. And that's not always the case, but that's out of your control in that situation. So yeah, my answer is basically there's levels to this, and I'll kind of start with the most like hands-off, easiest way to work with a client, all the way down to things that are more complex. And as you move down that scale to the things that are a lot more complex and involved and strategy focused, like Andrew said, that's when the payday definitely increases dramatically, but so does the work, and so does the complexity of the project. There's a lot more opportunity for things to kind of go off the rails a little bit, and for you to go down rabbit holes and find dead ends, and so it does get more complex. But at the very top level, the easiest way that I get involved with a client, the most hands off, is they've already got their strategy in place. They've got their outlines. They've actually written all of the copy as well. And, just coming up to an important event, they just want to make sure that they can run it by someone who has looked at far more email campaigns than they ever have, just to kind of find opportunities for that low-hanging fruit to correct any, silly mistakes that they're making, a poor subject line that's going to destroy their open rates, or, making silly mistakes like having 6 call to actions in the same email when there's really one that they care about, things like that. So that's usually just me scheduling 1-hour consulting calls where we'll go through some emails together, and I'm pointing out some high level things, and I'm not writing copy whatsoever, unless there's something that's so apparent to me that I can just kind of blurt it out of my mouth while we're on that 1-hour call to make it better. It's just focused on like strategy and some common oversights. After that, the next level would be that I would receive, the sequence strategy. So I know that we're going to have these 9 emails over these 20 days. They've already decided this. They've already put together a detailed outline for each of those emails. So I don't need to really think about what needs to be said. Instead, I'm just focused on like how we're going to say it. And so that's where it's important to have that conversation where you're honest with them. You let them know that because they've done the strategy and the outline and you're just writing the copy, you're only responsible for making sure that it's said properly in the most effective way. You're not at all responsible for making sure that you're actually saying the right things. And that's important. And this is an opportunity too. And this has happened to me where as soon as you say that, they're like, oh shoot, like, I don't know if I like those risks. And you maybe take a look at the strategy and the outlines and let us know if there's anything we could do better. And that's kind of your in to expand the scope and of course, charge more as well. Because
so they're like,
a lot more
wait, you're saying that I can't blame you if this goes wrong? All right,
yeah,
all right.
exactly.
Maybe we can change the scope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. And as long as you're changing the scope and anything else like pay and timelines to fit that, it's a good opportunity for you to add more value and to make a lot more money on the same type of project. After that, the next level of involvement would be you receive the sequence. So they've already decided which emails you need, when they're going to go out. And then it's up to you to kind of generate an outline. So for each of the 9 emails in the sequence, they've decided on, you are going to show them that we're going to make these points in approximately these order and in approximately this order. And this is why for each of those emails. Then once approved, you're actually writing the copy, and that's where you're at that point of the previous step there. So you're writing at that point. And this is actually how I work with well, I haven't only worked with them this way, but for my most recent project, I worked with Circle in this capacity where they've done the research. They've got a really bright team, so I trust a lot of the research that they're doing. They're on the ball. They're always talking to customers constantly, and so they generated the sequence. They had 9 emails. This is the topic for each of those, and then I had to write outlines, the subject lines, and I wrote the copy. So even 7 years in, like this is not below me to just come in and be the copywriter, but I either A, have to trust the company that I'm working with, or B, let them know the risks of kind of excluding me from that part of the project.
Yeah, I think that's, sorry, can
No,
I just say, I think that's that's a huge part of it is that you trust that team, because like, if, whatever Joe Blow SaaS company came along and they were like, hey, we have the sequence mapped out and it's going to be 5 emails, and you're sort of asking them questions that show that they don't really know what they're talking about. They don't really know what they're doing. I have a feeling that you are not going to handle that the same way that you do with a company like Circle, where you're like,
no,
okay, these people get what they're doing. I am happy to be a part of this because we're all skilled at our little part of what we do.
Yeah, for sure. Like I like to, I would at least want to poke a little bit and be like, okay, like how did you come up with this strategy? Like, have you been interviewing customers? And that's when they'll be like, oh no, I read this HubSpot article and said this is a good outline for an onboarding sequence or something like that. And that's where, I have to let them know of their risks. Whereas with Circle, like I know that they are constantly like interviewing customers, even with like no like end project in mind. It's just they're just constantly having a dialogue with them.
Yeah.
And so they're on it, and so I'm able to trust it. And then after that, this is where you start to get into the more complex but higher paying projects, and this is where like heavy strategy. And this has happened too for me, where a business will come to me and they'll say, take a look at all of our emails and let us know if you see any opportunities to either improve current sequences. Should we just stop sending certain sequences? Are there certain sequences that are missing from our email strategy? Which ones are those? And then maybe put together a plan to like which emails do we need in this new sequence that you're recommending? And then you'd have to go through that whole process of, the outlines and writing the copy. And so you kind of take it from more of a strategic starting point of taking a look at all of their emails all the way down to writing. And obviously this is going to be a longer project, much more valuable. You should definitely charge a lot more, not only because you're adding more value, but because there's a lot more opportunity to go down like the rabbit hole and run into dead ends once you start getting into strategy. It's really hard to predict exactly how long something's going to take versus, if I'm writing an email, I know I'm going to write an email in approximately this amount of time, and it's super easy for me to plan out. And then I guess the most involved that you can get would be a business just comes to you, and this doesn't usually happen early on in your career, but later on, once you're a familiar face to a lot of people and people just trust you, they'll be like, all right, I just want you to take a look at like our business and let us know like what we're doing wrong and make it all better. And they don't have any goals in mind whatsoever. So that happens, and that's not going to happen early on, but it does start to happen later. And that's where you get to charge a lot more money and you get to have a lot more fun, but you also own it. You like, if it sucks, if what you do sucks, like it's on you, like it's a decision you made most likely. Right. So, it's definitely higher stakes. And then I guess, I think we had similar answers when it came to working with design. So in my experience, when I've worked with a SaaS company on their emails and they've always had like a history of like very colorful design heavy templates, one of the first things that I'll recommend we test is stripping all that away and sending something that looks a little bit more like a plain text email, whether it actually is plain text or it's just, we've taken a lot of those design elements out and it's just focused on like good typography. So with that in mind, like I don't usually have a lot of design needs for what I do, but, the other reason that I stay away from working with designers on email is just because of the way I like to work. I like to work in a way where I control what's happening. And so I like to do my work. And then after that, I'll say my recommendation is to keep it plain. If you decide to throw this thing into crazy colorful templates, like have at it, but I don't want to think about it. Like that's not even my domain of expertise. Like you should have a designer that you trust and not have to ask your copywriter exactly how it should all look. And then similarly, like implementation, never. The furthest I've gone is like read-only access to an email marketing platform where I can't accidentally click something or turn something off. And I wouldn't even dream of like implementing the emails and like scheduling them to go out and everything like that, because yeah, I don't want a lawsuit. Like it's not hard to imagine a situation where they've got this big event planned, this big campaign, and you schedule things improperly and emails don't go out, they go out at the wrong time or they go to the wrong people. And they could look at that as like, you cost us sales. Like we have
Those
a
are
reason to believe we're
damages.
going to make this money. Damages. And that scares me. And I'd rather just avoid that. And I think a freelancer, I've avoided it successfully this long. So I'm positive you can avoid it. And similar to what you said, like maybe if you're like an email agency, that might be something you get into where you go from beginning all the way to implementation. But otherwise, if you're looking at this as a copywriter, I don't think that's expected by most companies. In fact, I would think most companies are smart enough to not want someone who isn't playing around in their tool all day to implement them. Like that's just because like think how many email marketing software tools there are out there. You'd have to be familiar with so many of them and not make any mistakes. So
And some of
it'd
them
be
are
silly.
heavy duty. I mean,
Oh
like
yeah.
Marketo. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not you're going to spend half of your day tweaking your email templates, and it's
Oh yeah.
never going to look right.
Yeah.
And it's not Mailchimp. Yeah, so it's a lot of different systems to learn, a lot of risk, and it's really just not necessary. So especially if you're just kind of getting into this and you're still trying to get a feel for like, what do clients even expect from me, or what do they want from me? Copy and strategy are really the places that you want to go. And as you kind of included, like sort of like reviewing and auditing and things like that, those which kind of go under strategy or copy, they're pretty related, but you can get really far without ever touching design or implementation to a system. You can ignore that for as long as you want, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure. And just make sure that you know that like there isn't one way that you have to do this. Just make sure that it's scoped properly. I mean, certain things like budget and timelines are going to factor into this. So if they have like a 2-week turnaround, you're not going into that most involved level where you're just tearing apart like their entire business and figuring out what they need. It's got to be very focused on executing a certain amount of deliverables, and that's it. And that's all you can do there. And I guess one last little tip is one way you can add a little bit more value, build some trust with a new client, and increase your deal size is if you make it so that, that first project or your first engagement is maybe that 1-hour consultation where you go through something that they're already working on. And then after that, you have an execution project after that. So you kind of turn one project into 1.5 projects by adding a bit of consulting on the front end. And that's an opportunity for them to kind of test you out a little bit without spending all the money. And it gives you an opportunity to show your value and, perhaps like expand the scope a little bit and then execute after that. So it can also be a win-win. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I hope you weren't hoping for like, do exactly this every single time, but that's what the blog posts are for. They'll tell you the one thing you need to do all the time. And I think what we're trying to do is to show people like there's a lot of nuance once you've been doing this for a while, and to be comfortable with it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Anything else?
I think we're good.
All right, let's call it there.